Hello, Dini. Hello.
Hi, how are you? You excited about the project being kind of done?
Yeah, it's good to be at this level of doneness, so to speak. Hang on, I'm just going to we have the transcript, but I think I need to launch a thing for it to be properly done. There is a like an AI bot that helps us with things. Okay, AI companion, there it is. Start. Okay, got it. Okay, good. Yeah, it's good. I just
Hey,
hello. Those are amazing headphones. Those are the ones you had here, right?
no. Yes, they are. They're Bose.
Yeah. I
I
got
was
the
trying
new
to.
Apple AirPods, the small ones, Pro 2.
Uh-huh.
They are
Uh-huh.
so amazing. I can recommend them to absolutely everyone, especially the adaptive setting, because you
Uh-huh.
can, when I work in a, hi, Gabo, glad you're here.
Hey,
Oh, you have the super fancy Apple ones. Finally, over the last week or two, I've started seeing them out and about. They have been so rare until right now for some reason.
yeah, it's time to, yeah, I see that too.
Yeah,
Hello, Dini, uh, Livia,
Real, how are you?
Hi, good to see you.
good to see
Hi,
you.
Olivia.
of course, you saw Dini all the way back in Rome.
Yes, yes, I enjoy the
How have you been, Gabriel?
Cortex.
Haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a hard month, uh, professionally. Personally, everything's good. Yeah, it's good. I mean, we are onboarding first users to the system, so uh, yeah, so a lot of feedback. Mostly from Mark Anderson.
Mark Anderson is like, he gives the best feedback of anybody I've ever worked with.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, and the worst. You know, Livia, I'm glad to hear you laughing the loudest because you guys, in this context, you're exactly the same. Showing you something, it better be right, because otherwise you're going to say this period is likely too big. I mean, you both have eyes that no other humans have. So, yeah.
Well, good. I I think that's great to yeah to laugh at myself.
Actually, it's been really interesting putting because we've been putting some old, basically academic papers into Minter, and actually it's been really interesting in a way that I certainly didn't foresee until we started, just how much the structure of, say, an academic document requires sort of things you don't realize you need until you need them. So it's been really, really interesting, actually, what we've been doing.
Mm.
Today I had my champagne already. I had lunch with a friend I haven't seen in 15 years. We both spent time together over 20 years in California. Wonderful. And she's in a completely different field, super nice. Mentioned the book launch and a little bit of our work. And then she showed how, as you all know, on the phone now, you can, in a picture, you can select text and the OCR is just amazing. Just wondering how that'll impact PDFs in the future because they're so badly rendered. Maybe we should just ignore what the PDF tries to give us and just go on the surface. So I just, since you mentioned academic documents.
Well,
I was going to mention to Rob, hey, Rob, I got the gloves into the VR environment. They're beautiful. Very exciting. Gorgeous handmade gloves for the VR game that we're building for Rob. I'll show that if you stick around after the meeting, or if I can see you this afternoon, I'd love to show you all these things. I can.
This afternoon would be better. I have a GCI meeting at 9, yeah.
Yeah, good.
And as I was saying about Fabian, oh, sorry. Hi, Fabian.
Hello, hello.
All this
Completely
stuff in the
innocent.
Zoom. You're innocent, yes. Right. I have no idea how many people are going to be here today. It really doesn't matter. But as you know, the book is now available on the website. The Amazon printed copy, which it turns out had a problem with the visual meta, ironic, but it's printed, is under review. So maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but I don't expect there will be many more people buying it than me. I also will be redoing the first book now into the same format, so that'll happen. So that's all very, very exciting. But one thing I think we should spend most of our time on today is, I'll give you a second link. If you can have a look at volume 5, please. There's just a touch of an intro thing. I really would like you, the core, to see what you think first, please.
Do that.
Has any of you come across this sphere thing before?
I was reading some, I remember such a visual maybe 5 years ago about PhD as the current boundary of knowledge, and then you make like a tiny dot on that frontier, and then it expands everything, but it's like barely visible, but it's still like the edge, the frontier. So it reminds me of it. It wasn't a sphere, but it was maybe a disk or something a bit blurry at the edges. But I think the same idea, basically.
Yeah, I find this, well, the same, but also the opposite. Because one thing I've been thinking about, I first wrote our volume 5, very similar to this current volume. But what I'm trying to communicate here, and I've seen this, it was presented while I think I was at university. I need to find out whose idea it was, but the idea is not that the understanding increases. It is that our knowledge of how little we know increases, because the boundary between understanding and what we don't understand becomes bigger. I think that's such a cool, cool notion. And as an academic community, I wait for Patrick to come in. Hi, Michael.
Hey, hey.
Hi, Patrick.
Hi there. How's everyone?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. How is everyone?
So Frodo, it's always interesting to me that when I'm working right now with some folks, and it's one person in particular, it's always interesting to talk to this person because they don't know what they don't know.
Oh, really?
You know? And so they're talking as if they know these things, and everyone sits in the room and listens to this person and goes, what? And they have no idea what they don't know. You know, their scope is so small and what they do. And that's what you're talking about. Once we understand what we don't know, we realize a whole lot more about what directions we should be going with our brains, right? What's out there, what's really out there.
Yeah, Patrick, if you click on the link, just to catch you up.
Yeah.
To not volume 4, volume 5, just cleaning my desktop here.
Yes. Okay.
The idea we're talking about is for the next volume. Here's Leon, actually, brilliant. Leon, welcome. Please click on the, I'll send it again because you can't see it, the volume 5 link. Maybe we should talk nonsense for another 2 minutes, give people till 10 past.
This is interesting. This is very much almost like Eugene Thacker's idea of the horror of philosophy. He has this kind of Lovecraftian take on philosophy. In other words, basically what happens is that the philosophy is that thing that which tries to go upon the tries to go beyond the boundary of the conventionally knowable, and expand that circle. But the thing is that in the Lovecraftian sort of way, it's like that's what Lovecraft would call, the locus of horror, so because of the fact of its current unfathomability, which I think also kind of is interesting what they're starting to talk about now about the latent spaces of AI.
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, okay, 9 past, right. So everybody's gone to the Future of Text Volume 5 page, right?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So the reason I'm putting it up here is kind of the opposite of increasing our understanding. Of course, that's what we need to do. But as an academic community, because obviously we're different kinds of communities all in one, as an academic community, I think we need to really widen the circumference of the circle, the intersection between what we know and what we don't know. And I think, Mark, your unknown unknowns Johari window reference is perfect, because we need to get in touch with different communities, different people, different ways of looking at the world to try to find out our unknowns.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you learn about the different aspects of text, the more, just like we have this little Einstein quote, the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. So if at the end of next year we have some great understanding, brilliant. But if we manage to put into print or other media, these are the things that are applicable and we don't really know what it is, I think that would be really valuable. What do you guys think?
Mm-hmm.
I got one. I need more responses, please.
Can you
Look,
disagree
I
with
have
that?
2 drinks.
I
They're
mean-
going to last me the 2 hours. So.
Well, I mean, how do we disagree with that? I mean, that's just kind of a
No,
given.
I was just hoping you would riff on it. I'm glad you, Dini, I know you would agree. Absolutely.
I put up the link to Thacker's book. I understand. Plumbing the philosophy is plumbing the realms of unthinkable.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick, you certainly represent a different point of view.
Yeah.
Community.
There's I forget this diagram, but there was it's a knowledge diagram that I came upon probably about 2-3 months ago, and it was something that I'd been working with at American University of Sharjah back in 2015, but I didn't know that, I think that somebody else came up with basically the same idea. In other words, we have this locus of knowledge that is pretty much defined, and then we have this blurry area of this blurry kind of liminal area of things that are speculative but have some grounding, and then there's the area beyond that which we are in the unknown or the unthinkable or the let's see here, beyond our current epistemic space. And I think this is something that's very interesting. In other words, it's like I think the idea of the liminal space between the known episteme and the thoroughly unknown, and that sort of thing. I think this is a really interesting, rich space to investigate.
Isn't that what science does?
Well, yes, but
Isn't that where science is located?
of course.
Well, science, as I understand it, is somebody has some kind of an idea, a vague notion of something, a theory, based on the knowledge they have of the field and the data, the research, and all that good stuff. Tries to figure out either how this works or to get more data. And on that, they build new. But of course, the big breakthroughs in science, and of course, Livia, I agree with you, but it's not the standard, I would say, is outside of this. Not following the scientific process, but looking at it from a different angle.
Well, I mean,
Could you give me an example of such a really important, innovative breakthrough that somehow wasn't being built on, that was, let's say, not in any way related to this known episteme?
Well, I think the closest I can think of would be the relativity and the speed of light. You know,
Well, except there was a huge history of people being interested in those sorts of things. And clearly there were all kinds of problems with the existing understanding. And of course, there was a huge breakthrough, but it wasn't a breakthrough that you know, was not intimately related to what was going on in science at the time.
I think there are three things involved on that, because I kind of opened this can of worms. Is that, I mean, on one hand, basic research, you know, looks for holes in knowledge and, you know, goes and searches for that. And then we have these things that, you know, like the unknown unknowns. But the one thing that I kind of look at here, and how do we find those? There's another metaphor that I use: the difference between innovation and invention. Invention is disruptive. It is, you know, it's almost a black swan. Innovation comes from, you know, in other words, innovation comes from modest increments, or radical innovation comes from us finding those things in the holes, like what they call, what is it in mathematics, the millennium problems, which one was just found recently. So in other words, these are things that are put forth, you know, for people to find, that we know that this is an unsolved problem. But the thing is that how do we find new problems to solve?
I see Leon has his hand up, so I'll give it to Leon. But Livia, just wanted to, I don't want to get into necessarily a hard discussion on this, but all I'm trying to do is to emphasize that there are things we probably should look at that we haven't thought about. That's all. It's a very light-hearted.
No, and I think that's absolutely the case. I completely agree with that. I was just concerned about. No, I was a little concerned about the. Let's say the lack of nuance.
Sure, that sounds like you. So, Leon, sorry, twice you've had your hand up. I'm so apologetic.
No worries. Can you hear me?
No.
Oh. Yeah, I thought I might have an example which sort of integrates all these answers, which is that when Einstein got the Nobel Prize, it wasn't for his general relativity theory. It was for something else, because the scientists at that point weren't really sure if this general relativity, this crazy general relativity stuff, was actually working and real. So this basically means that years later he got credited with, like, okay, well, maybe your theory isn't that crazy. So this kind of shows that yes, science is actually doing this, and also not necessarily in the fastest way, because yeah, coming back to the unknown, there are scientists out there and researchers who are perhaps not part of the mainstream scientist groups, but who are actually doing the next level things. But yeah, it's sometimes, you know, science needs a bit of time to sort of catch up, because it's of course also sort of a safety net that it doesn't move too quickly. But that's a very interesting way in which science does and does not immediately, you know, promotes the next level things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I just realized that this is based on. I've started a new art project which has nothing to do with text. It's photography. And the idea is to take pictures of places that we don't notice. So it's called ignored/unseen. The first example of this is the middle of a roundabout. Because when you're driving through a roundabout, you're expressly not focusing on whether there's this or that on the actual roundabout. You need to look at the cars, the road, and concentrate. So that's an arty thing. But in our field here, we're looking at the text, we're looking at the interactions, we're looking at the usage. What is it about text we're not looking at? I think it'll be
That's a
an
really
interesting
wonderful question.
Hmm?
I think that's an absolutely wonderful question. And also a wonderful, also the idea of looking at the inside of the roundabout is absolutely wonderful. Eye-opening kind of idea. Mm.
But yeah, so your comment as well, Patrick, about space, yeah, what we fancily call liminal spaces, right? That's such a pretentious phrase. I just love to use it.
It is great, isn't it?
I saw a documentary about somebody who collects roundabouts in England. They go take photographs of different roundabouts.
Another word is lacunae.
Yeah, but liminal is in between. Lacuna is what's missing, right?
Yeah, it's a gap.
I visited Stanford once, so I have these words. Literally from one meeting. I'm not joking. Right. So beyond this, we don't, Dini and I have no further news on our main project. We'll see how that goes. And we'll see how to deal with the book and so on. Of course, I was hoping for an update to Reader for today, but of course, there's a last-minute bug, so of course it'll be late. But I do hope that I can make the text available in whatever format you guys want to experiment with, HTML, Word, whatever. Keep playing around with that. Leon and I spent a few sessions last week on AI and timeline and stuff, which was really very educational, just to go through an experiment on. Leon, you want to talk about anything about that?
So yeah, just to summarize, it was indeed educational. We had, I would say, no idea what we were doing, but we're just like trying out new features without coding. Actually, we were just chaining AI prompts together, which we sort of applied to the selected text in a document. I think that's what we did, right? And then we came up with some pretty cool observations. One of them was we're now able to do with text and with books what actually books, what people want to get out of books. Yeah, we were focused on that, I think. Like now we can really focus on what do people want to get out of books? What did they wanted to get out of books originally? And then the book, the printing press, they were just one possible way to sort of, give it to the people. But perhaps, you know what, Frode, how about you try to summarize? I find it very hard to sort of summarize our insights in a couple of sentences.
Well, I'm not going to do that, but you did spark a very related thing, and that is how dating, men and women dating, and specifically men and women, I don't know about other contexts, have changed over the last many years with apps and social media. And I think it's extremely related. I just realized because of what you said. Because before, you kind of, to meet someone in a coffee shop, whatever, you are there in your body. There's a certain commitment and things build in a specific way. It's been going on for literally hundreds of thousands of years. And now, you meet someone and, okay, swipe, on your app to meet another person. So because I was teaching at the time when this happened, and I got to know some of the students and their parents, one of the girls was the one who brought this to my attention. She said, and she was, very attractive young lady. She said, dating has completely changed. She used to be able to go out on the town, be pretty, and meet people, and things would happen. Now there wouldn't be as many second dates. And she blamed it on this. So that's what got me thinking, how is it relevant to this? It's completely relevant because before, to read, we'd have to pick up a book or a document, whether picking it up physically or digitally, it's still there in front of us. Now we have online dating for work. So meaning summaries and keywords and so on. So we have different ways we can dip in and out, different degrees and distances through which we can interact with the knowledge in books. So we don't have to take the commitment to open even a PDF, have it full screen, sit down and read it. We can choose to just swipe left for documents and knowledge too. So that's going to have really interesting societal effects. You know, we have been really focused on how we can kind of chain these together into analysis and stuff. But what does it happen to the nice PDF, who might be great to take home to your parents, but may not be sexy on first reading?
I teach a course here at the university called Language, Text, and Technology. And we look at the history of human communication across mediums, from orality to writing in various formats, to printing, to electronic media, to mobile, and to what I consider the future, which is no screen at all, right? Screenless environments. And what's interesting is the arguments someone like Camille Paglia made back in the day, and others like her, is that the great things that happened in our civilization happened when we had printing press. The printing press and writing gave us the ability to do the things that we have. Skyscrapers, uses skyscrapers, freeways, all these great architectural environments that we built. But the Egyptians built the pyramids without a goddamn book. So one thing I always think about is that the human brain has the ability to do what it's tasked to do at the time it's tasked to do it. We build into the environment, and we build the environment that we're into. So I think the kinds of things you're talking about might be a revolutionary experience. In other words, we're going through kind of a wobble, but we all sort out. At some point it sorts out, you know, and I think that the loss of sitting down with a 300-page book, my students don't read books, right? But reading a 300-page book, they're reading all the time. They're reading more than I ever read, and I read a book a week. But they're constantly reading. They're reading different kinds of things in different kinds of mediums. And so I always caution my colleagues at the university who look dimly at this generation of students that aren't reading, I don't know, a novel, right? They still create the most amazing things, and I see it because I'm teaching them. I'm watching them create amazing things, and they're not reading Thackeray. They're surviving without Shakespeare. It's hard to imagine, but they're doing it. So anyway, just saying.
Yeah, thank you, Denny. It's obviously great in this community to hear reading is not dead. So, Mark.
Yeah, I was just thinking of this, that in fact, all the activities I'm involved in it's showing up an interesting thing that, you know, the PDF quite unintentionally has become, you know, it's our last hand on the handrail. You know, we will not let go of print, and PDF forces paper print notions onto its meaning. You can do things within it, but generally it holds on to things. And one of the challenges is to move beyond that, not looking at it in terms of the format and getting hung up on the letters, but the degree to which we structure and approach things as constrained by a linear page. So it is quite interesting, you know, and finding what doesn't translate. So things like, really interesting things like footnotes, the notion of footnotes, get massively mangled when you step out of a strict print environment. Now, whether you love or hate footnotes is a whole different issue. So the fact that you can have these alternative things following alongside, and it isn't just as simple as saying, oh, I'll have another web page, because there is a sense of some things have more proximity to the main article and something else. And I don't say any of these things pretending to have answers to them. But what I do see is, you know, there is this long shadow that we're perhaps being a bit slow at recognizing. because I think if we recognized it more, not necessarily as a bad thing, but just the degree to which some of our outlooks are overly constrained by our experience of print, I think it would be to our betterment. And that doesn't mean books suddenly go away or we stop liking or reading them, not at all. But just in terms of not trying to bound our thinking into little metaphorical pages.
For more on the topic, please read Mr. Anderson's article in our book. This is an example where Mark and I slightly disagree, but in a useful way. And I think that as we move into more XR coolness things, just wait for Carl here briefly. It's funny how long it takes to connect to Zoom. Anyway, I think Carl is here. Hi, Carl. So one thing I think will be really, really useful is to try to map the. Hi, Carl. Will be to try to map the territory, and this might be a case where a proper 3D XR mind map might work, because while I entirely agree with Mark in terms of our thinking and in terms of interactivity, I do not agree with him entirely in terms of storage, archiving, and also a place for long form content. Even TikTok now allows for 3-minute videos, not just 30 seconds, meaning that even the stereotypical soundbite things recognize that sometimes you need a bit more. So philosophically, Mark, we agree. And this would be great to literally map out in space, you know, when you're reading a certain thing here. But how does that relate to the fact that you may need the bigger thing? So, yeah, that's going to be good.
Just to clarify, I certainly wasn't arguing against long form. It's a subtle thing of recognizing how the things that you've used before sometimes unwittingly constrain your thinking. And it doesn't mean you aren't being imaginative, but it's being able to stand apart from the nostrums of before. I mean, artists tend to be much better about this because they happily transgress all these things, whereas most of us use this sort of structure because it helps us get stuff done.
Yeah, but
it sits there at a level below, and we don't think about it because it just gets us to the stuff. And it's not bad. This is the whole thing. It's not bad. So it's not a zero-sum argument. But I sort of find myself keep tripping over things. Oh yeah, actually, oh right. So we're doing this because, well, that actually came out of a process that was a hard limit 100 years ago or something.
Well, okay,
we don't need it now.
Right. So in comment on that, we do have 5,500 years worth of evolution of writing to keep in mind, you know, and I find very often we experiment all over the place, like crazy mind maps and color guides and all kinds of weirdness. Brandel even made a magic carpet of text. These are really, really cool, but because a sentence has to be linear, you know, to have the grammar, of course you can have a word pointing to another word in a graph, but that's a very different kind of communication for a very different kind of use for a very different kind of time. The act of filling a page or some kind of a rectangle really does make a ton of sense. So should we move beyond it? Yes, no question. But it really shouldn't be thrown away either, right? This whole idea of just writing in space is really cool until the background is really annoying, and then you want semi-transparently, and then you realize actually a rectangle is not so bad. And in terms of our book, at least, some of the pages, there is very strong intention with the layouts. Even something as simple as paragraph breaks, you know, with the indents, it really helps people see how things relate. So should we be able to change, first of all, the binding of a PDF to be the most basic thing? Of course, yes. Should we be able to, I see here Dini and Rob talking about books released in chapter version. I think that is absolutely amazing. Leon was talking about a way to maybe enable that, kind of like a modern RSS. That would be great. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous for us technological people here to release one book a year, right? We tried the journal, but I never got any uptake. You know, of course, we're going to start promoting this stuff, but if we released a journal every 3 months or something, and people in the community read and commented, that would work. But the systems themselves, absolutely. I wish there was a way we produce a volume of work and then we kind of tear it apart in a way so that it can go automatically on Twitter or whatever else it would be. So you can choose how to read the work. Yes, sorry, I'm taking all the time here. Somebody else must have a comment on this. How can we make the text more consumable? Is one of the things we're talking about, right?
Apologies for being late. This one ran over. One of the things I've been looking at, there's that Nicholas Luhmann and the whole Zettelkasten process that he came up with. I think it's kind of, so you have like small, almost self-contained text, and then you can kind of, I guess, it can kind of be deconstructed and then reconstructed into things, and you kind of have it's like self-contained essays, kind of, but then you can kind of mix and match. I think it's amazing. I mean, in 30 years, I think he wrote 60 books and published 400 scholarly articles and probably countless in his notes and stuff. So I know there's a university in Germany that's trying to digitize his work there.
It's actually on some of it's Bielefeld is the university. I don't have the URL in front of me at the moment, but some of the stuff has definitely been digitized. It is interesting. I'm sorry, and I'd be very brief because I see it as a hand up, but is that also in the context of this, how we mistake the process for the form, because as people, some point out, I'm sure if Luhmann was working now, he wouldn't be using index cards. He used that because it was technology at the time. But it's amazing how often you see people, and it is a bit like that scene from Monty Python, How Shall We, that people are absolutely obsessed on recreating the process because their line of thinking is that he had all the success. So if I do exactly what he did, I clearly will have the same success. And of course, I mean, I think that's somewhat bogus thinking, which doesn't in any way devalue the underlying notion, which of catching all these notions, but it plays it. And again, he was sort of doing hypertext before you could do hypertext. The funny thing is that people who have really powerful hypertext tools are trying to build digital index cards. Yeah, food for thought there. Sorry, Leon.
Thanks. Yeah, that is a good point. Also, thanks for mentioning Zettelkasten. I keep hearing it. I should check it out. I was actually wondering if the following has ever been done in history already, but we just forgot about it. An example is symbols to sort of hint the reader what he's going to read. For example, in the town I grew up in, we had a library, and they basically had a map with all kinds of symbols. And if you would look on the back of the books, you could see these symbols there. So I remember that a tree meant a novel about the countryside, for example, or a dream, sort of like a dream bubble. It was something like philosophy or something. And so that was really cool. And if you compare that, for example, to these small pieces of text people are producing every day on Twitter, on all these platforms, like I have no idea, what to expect. What is it going to be about? And so yeah, I'm just wondering, isn't there some kind of language or culture who has sort of like maybe prefixed text with a certain symbol that you could already filter out, like, no, I'm not really interested in it, or I'm just curious.
Yeah, Dini, please.
And when I was Mariusz Pozarski and I were working on our book, the Cambridge book, we wanted to show the show like videos and screenshots and like moving images, animations, 3D models that go with the theory stuff in the book, print book. So we developed a multimedia book on the Scalar platform. And then what we did is we came up with a series of logos, so to speak, images that represent each of those media types so that they would be embedded in the book. So you could click on it in the book and you'd see that this little symbol means video. So rather than a URL, you click on the video symbol and it takes you to the multimedia book with the video, right? So you marry the two items together. And I thought that was a really useful way to bring print and electronic media together. The problem was Cambridge University Press wasn't quite ready for symbols for hypertext. So we had to eliminate those symbols and use the URLs. But ultimately, that was the idea. And so if you look at the multimedia book, it still has all the symbols for all the media. And so even if you're not looking at the print book, you could still get a sense of how much is video, how much is animations, how much are these things. And I think that's not a bad way of cluing the reader into what they're about to, experience with the work, which is part of what I think accessibility is all about, trying to be accessible, not just in terms of disabilities, but also what they're intellectually getting ready to experience.
This really feeds into the idea of trying to build a huge map of this, because symbols can be really stupid or really useful. And in the example you're talking about, Dini, of people don't like to click on links. There is a huge weight to clicking on a link. You get either a new tab or a new window. We all know what it's like. And so if you have some preview notion of what kind of thing it is, that is very useful. But then the previews, if they're not icons like you're talking about, they themselves can be heavy on the page. So this is one of the things I really hope we can do in our dialogue over next year, is to define things, to have more, instead of monthly or every roughly monthly presentations by someone, I want us to have more themed discussions. For instance, let's only talk about how can you find an article, or another one of you are reading an article, how can you move about, to try to do more of that kind of stuff. Because the irony of text is that text has to be visual, other, let's for this ignore Braille. But while it is visual, it's also intensely not visual. Once you can't read the specific words, then we're into layout, colors, and pictures. I find that a huge issue. It's fascinating and also something we should address, I think. So yeah, hello, Jen. Hello. Finally, you're here. We can start. We've been going over several different things. I'm just going to give you a link in the chat here to our next book, which is we're trying to look at different ways to try to increase knowing what we need to understand. Yeah, Gabo, anything you want to talk about before you jump? Where are you? Oh, did he jump? Oh, leave for 10 minutes, not in 10 minutes. Sorry, that's me reading. I'm not very good at it. Okay, let me, oh yeah, Olivia, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just found out about how you could raise your hand, so I'm not really good at all this technology, but I wanted to just make some comments on a few things that have already gone by. One of which is this idea essentially of the fragmented text. And I think that one place that we absolutely see this is in cookbooks. Okay, it used to be that you had just, I have a whole series of cookbooks here, and now cookbooks are fragmented in the sense that, you you go and you look for what it is that you want for a particular recipe, even from a particular book. So I think that there are certain kinds of texts which really lend themselves to this kind of fragmentation very successfully, while some others may not. When it comes down to this idea about having some kind of symbols, I think the great problem is that for within a very small domain, having a limited number of symbols can be very helpful. However, when so for example, the example of which media is this? Which medium is this? There's going to be 10 of them or 12 or whatever, and it's very easy for people to see the symbols and begin to work with them. But we have this other symbolic language, which is, exploding by the day, which are emojis of varying sorts. And basically, they are almost, the more there are, the less useful they really are in order to be able to access one and really think you're going to be able to get the point across. So I think that language is kind of useful in certain ways there. And the other thing really had to do with, again, how do we access things? And in different fields, in different arenas, of course, it's done quite differently. In scientific or scholarly articles, we have keywords, we have abstracts, which basically are little previews that allow us to see a little bit what's going on behind the scenes. I think we always have this problem of essentially trying to compact knowledge, and then what we find out is, well, that we've built, for example, some kind of categorization scheme, and it kind of leaks because none of them actually work perfectly. But one of them that works really well, actually, are things like the Dewey Decimal System. And there probably are others in other countries where, in fact, what you have is you do have a scheme that you can look up that, tells you, okay, this particular piece of text concerns all these different kinds of things. I do think that this is a fascinating conversation, and I really look forward to, being able to explore it in the, hopefully coming year.
Thanks, Livia. Carl, and then I have a little intro for Jim and Brandel, who just joined us.
Okay. With the interview you had done with Doug Engelbart there, this gets as part of your Invisible Revolution thing when he's talking about December and Monday in early December. So I think that was 73 years ago today, or December 4th. Because the December 1950 and December 2023 calendars happen to be identical and things. And well, I've been looking at Zettelkasten, but also Zettel. I mean, I think what Nicholas Luhmann did is kind of the dynamic knowledge repository concept from Doug. Another couple of things I've run across, the DOI numbers. In fact, there's a new authority that they did like a digital hand. So they're actually talking about like a digital persona could get like a DOI number. So so I think that like all the stuff we went through with Hollywood and the intellectual rights and people getting compensated. So how DOIs kind of fit into this, and then I also was thinking about the QR codes type of thing. If those kind of are often links to out to particular sites or whatever. So kind of how those could evolve, or those are kind of could be embedded within symbols and stuff.
But first, just a tiny little thing. So I just told Deanie something here in the chat. She said, tell him I said hi, and I did a little tap back kind of a thing. That is such a great example, I think, of where emoticons do make sense. They add color for something. When I communicate with my friends via text, I hardly ever say okay. It is usually one of those. So I think that really gives an impression of emoticons as markers rather than necessarily their own freestanding things. But so to the new guys, we are looking at the page of book number 5. And we're talking there about increasing not only our understanding over the next year about the potential for the future of text, but also better understanding where our ignorance lies. And that will require a wider community and maybe more specific discussion. So maybe we should have more frequent themed discussion. Because right now, for instance, we did one of our classic things. We wandered into emoticon land, which, you know, comes up randomly very often. We all think about them. So to have a little bit more structure. But the big question to all of you is, you know, we've done 4 of these books now, which is 3 more than I expected. We hope to do another one next year. But as a community, how should we be? I know not every one of you come here all the time. That's absolutely fine. And some of the people who are regulars couldn't be here today. But are there any changes for how we discuss, communicate, deal with each other, deal with these things, etc.? Yes, Rob, we see the Harry Potter reference. So yeah, are there any thoughts on the community or how to further the discourse?
Do you think that something like a Discord would possibly be something that could keep records of discussions or something like that, or keep threads or whatnot, you know, for, you know, longer than Zoom chats?
We do have X/Twitter. Dania, yeah, I see you.
I was gonna say, we're using Slack in our program. We decided not to use Discord because Discord is not an archival space. It's really hard to, it's really more just communication and playing together, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Slack, we have the educational version, which allows us to archive over infinite amount of time.
That's great.
And at the same time, we can huddle in a sound environment, and we can also Zoom right straight from the channel. It allows us to build a lot of channels. So in other words, we can have a channel for each volume of the book and discussions around. So I mean, we've organized it so that every class has its own channel. We have an art gallery, a digital art gallery in Slack, and also a cafe. So all of our workshops and everything occurs in the cafe, and we Zoom out of there if we need to, or we huddle, right? So it's a really great environment, and it's great also because if you have disabilities or sensory sensitivities, there's all kinds of ways to make it accessible. It comes at communication in a bunch of different directions.
So my perspective on that is a little different, and that is nobody here has this as a job. And, you know, Peter often says when the symposium is coming up, and I agree with him, we should distribute the book ahead of time, see if people will read it and comment. The level of engagement here is incredibly low in general. And I think that is one of the most important points. If this became a chore for anyone, it would just, you know, it wouldn't be any idea. We go through phases where some of us randomly meet up and so on. We do have a Twitter discussion simply because it's a bit of a default. But whenever we've tried in the last few years, we had a circle community. We do have a blog where anybody can post on there, which of course can be referred to from anybody's personal blog. Nothing happens. And also the journal was supposed to be, here's a brief thought. It'll be distributed and then people comment. And these things are all cited and connected through links. It just, nobody does it. So that's why I'm not saying we shouldn't try different means, but I'm just saying it has to be an incredibly light touch. Otherwise, we go away from the fun and academically stimulating discussion as it becomes a homework exercise, to put it that way. Over to you, Peter.
Yeah, going back to the topic of Slack, I was in a few Slack communities, and at some point, Slack changed their policy and shifted things so that you had to upgrade to a pay plan in order to access older material. So suddenly, over time, the entire body of material that those communities had in Slack slipped underneath the paywall, and more of it that went underneath the paywall of, you can't access your old posts from July, even stuff you wrote yourself, because it's out of the window unless you upgrade to a paid plan. And of course, what happened in each of those communities was whoever had originally set up the account had no interest in upgrading to a pay plan. So the whole community wound up being locked out of its entire history. So I have a very horrible feeling towards Slack as far as that goes. I mean, if we could be guaranteed that they wouldn't decide to change their policy towards academic organizations down the road and suddenly lock our archives in their vault, I'd be more comfortable with it. It might be appealing for us to try to write something of our own, more text-based, but with the ability to have some live threads injected inside of the text document. I always love rolling my own dog food, eating my own dog food and rolling my own solutions. And another thought there is that it would be nice for us to have an index somewhere of pointers to all of the different demos and working systems out there. For instance, I'd love to get my hands on a working zigzag, but I haven't been able to figure out how to get a zigzag running on my machine. So all I've seen so far are videos of people using zigzag, which is incredibly frustrating. And I'm sure there are other systems out there. So if we could have one point where we have all of the cool demos of advanced text type interfaces, here's how to find them and install them, it could be really, really useful.
Yeah, that sounds like your article coming up. That would be great, and that kind of article could very easily be on our blog. So, okay, so hang on, just going to go back to normal size. But so here's the thing: you can all see the screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's our glorious book. I hope you all have it already. One of the things we have within our PDF publishing system is this. I think most of you know it. So here's the introduction page. If you're reading it in Reader, these are the 3 prior volumes. You click on the citation here, and if you now click on the title of this, it loads that book instantly.
Wow.
And here it is. It loads it instantly because I happen to have it downloaded already. If I had not had it downloaded already, it would launch the website if it had a URL associated with the citation. If it didn't have a URL associated, it would do a Google search based on the information it had, right? So I'm showing you that because it's our book and it's our software, but also it is possible to link things. We don't need to have someone's web server to link things. In the olden print days, you could cite from one piece of paper to another. We can do that today and have it magically jump across your desk. So a completely open and connected environment is not that hard to do. What is more hard is to get the enthusiasm to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Mark. And Mark and then Brandel. Mark, we don't do
Sorry, yeah, it helps to turn the microphone on. Apologies. I was just going to say it's interesting what you're just saying about not having to sort of go through, a particular centralized web server, because that's something we're very much playing about with the work I'm doing with Gabo, who's ducked out for a moment, with Minter. It throws up sort of interesting new problems about how you put information, especially information that was written to be printed on a page and never structured for digital use. But what it opens up is the ability to actually start doing sort of transclusions rather as Ted imagined them. So if you want to talk about that thing, you bring it, you bring it into the space. It's early days, but that's one very positive angle that we're exploring at the moment. So, Brandel.
Yeah, I largely echoing Mark. Reading 7 Hypertext recently made it clear to me that it's essential for people to not to conflate the notion of hypertext writ large with the web and the specific functionality and capability that it sort of comes through. And one of the things that links and the idea of following links can do is just be opportunistic about what is the most appropriate way to respond to that at a given moment. And that might be that there is a URL, and I still think that the URL is a very valuable thing. But if you have but the other aspect of a browser, and something that I feel like Bob Horn's language in visualizing hypertext is very valuable, is to describe the distinctions between browsing and searching and collating and referencing. That and the reality is that the web is a set of opinions about priorities, and that so I would say that the way that the web currently works isn't everything, but also that that's not to say that the web technologies are irrelevant when somebody is building an alternative. So I still think that the browser per se is as it exists as a piece of technology is a really wonderful thing, but that you can start cobbling together your own notion of what a user agent is. That when if you ever do web development, you hear the term user agent, and that just means that the browser itself is supposed to be an agent on behalf of the user. But that means it shouldn't have to be exclusively Chrome or Safari or Firefox. If there are sort of underpinning web technologies that are germane to a particular point of view on what you're doing as a consequence of navigating a series of documents, be that over the internet or actually literally on your own device, then your browser is like if you step back from it, then a browser can be any program, and it can be doing anything with any set of documents. And once you start to have that level of autonomy over sort of selecting the functionalities and the strategies, I think that there are a lot of really interesting opportunities that kind of reveal themselves.
So I have a question for all of you. Since we are now talking about our community, what would you write? Right now on Twitter, for instance, in our little community, just to have a look at it, there are, I saw this posts, and there's a little bit of technical discussion. Adam comes in often on that, some renderings, and so on. So it's mostly, have you seen this, and what do you think of this? If we had a better system with all the dreams of all of us, what would you write? What kind of things would you use it? Okay, Dini, poetry, that's nice. I mean, because the thing is, having spent a lot of time in California, beautiful coffee, beautiful sunsets, talking about saving the world from a lefty techie point of view, it gets very circular at times, but it doesn't necessarily have a grounding in what the dialogue would be about, even for this kind of stuff. So that's why I'm asking, if you had this opportunity, what would you really use it for? And what would you really want to read it for? Because the notion of our book, it is, of course, a very old-fashioned word, but there's no reason why we shouldn't think of our book in entirely new ways. But my big problem is, as the publishing editor, because it's self-published, is not to get people to write articles. That's okay, but it tends to be a lot easier for people who are not in the core community. Somebody comes in, they write an article, they're happy that it's in there, sometimes see them, bye. You guys in the core community, it's absolute hell. And this is not me ragging on you guys at all, but I'm saying that has to be taken into account when looking at a better discourse system. My main advisor, Wendy Hall, who works for the United Nations, also doing AI stuff, she's very high and mighty. One of the things she said to me many years ago, I may have quoted it, she doesn't have time to write. She wants a place where she could put things together, such as here's a tweet, literally drag it over, and now it's part of the thing. That seems quite seductive. And now that we have AI co-pilots for both reading and consuming texts, that seems a bit seductive too. But I would really like, in a positive way, to hear the kind of things you guys would like to have in a written flow. Rob, okay, that's a really important question. Is there a way to forward a specific essay to someone else? Well, I do want to develop a way you can choose your own binding for any PDF document, so you extract only those pages. Not that doesn't exist yet, but what you can do, you can cite a specific article, and if you send that to that person, they should then be able to download and go immediately to that page. It's a great question. Right, yeah, I see your comment, Peter. Yeah, Leon, please, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to challenge your question a bit with another question. Like, have you ever had a chat message from a friend, or do you have a friend who always sends like a super long chat message, and which gives you the feeling like, oh shit, now I have to read all this, and you can also not say to this person like, hey, next time can you know, kind of like condense things a bit, because you know you like this person and there's no problem in a pub or something when you're just talking. What I'm trying to say here is that I think it's a sort of politeness that when you engage with somebody who asks you to write a piece for a book, you sort of know that the reader will be sitting down somewhere and really sort of like reserving time for this, and you like make a big story. In for example, this Twitter, the moment you have created this Twitter conversation, it's sort of implied that this is not gonna, we shouldn't waste each other's time, because when people use this, I have no idea what the other person is doing. Maybe they're doing their taxes, and then I'm thinking like, well, I will just drop in a link here so that boom, they know exactly what I'm trying to say here, or what I want to show. So I think it's a bit like it's both written in text, but it feels like I'm unconsciously pulled into a completely different ritual or something.
The answer to the first part of your question is Mark Anderson. He is one of my friends who will write long messages. And, you know, he doesn't particularly like to type, so I'm really flattered that he does. It's always thoughtful, but he will write long things, and sometimes I need to take time to read them. I think that's a really, really good point. I'm putting in the chat here, how can we note down a thought on a card? I'm putting card in quote marks because of the discussions earlier. But yes, you know, also I want to just read out, Mark was saying, would have written a shorter message, but I didn't have the time. You know, that's really, really important. And the one thing that I've learned in all these years of dealing with text is nothing is better than better edited writing, no matter what the tools are. So, you know, to try to be succinct and to the point, yes, that is the key thing. But there's got to be a coherent way to somehow record a thought in a manner that people can extract to their leisure, and it is not onerous to create, and that can be connected. Right, and this can go for prose, poetry, and so on. The thing that I hope to foster for this book is more pages of very, very little stuff on them. And some of you did that, and it's great. You know, the fact that it's in a big fat volume is one thing, but at least some of it is easily extractable, and some of it is massive. You know, that's the good mix. Okay, so let me ask you a specific question as a community then. For instance, one of the themes today is how we as a community can expand our horizon of what is beyond our understanding, not our knowledge only, but this. How could this be encapsulated? How could I present this to you? Maybe like there already is on the website, but how would you like to comment on that? If you please look at the page again, maybe, while you think. I'm just going to give you the link in case. So pretend that was written, forget that it's on a web page. It was written somehow. How would you like to attach your thoughts to it so it's shareable to the community?
One thing, sorry, go ahead, Leon.
Yeah, really short. Yeah, comments come in mind. In one part of my brain says, yeah, comments. And another part in my brain says that's a horrible idea.
I agree with both sentiments. Mark?
Yeah, it just made me think on the fact of it's not, I'm trying to find the right word. It's not privacy, but there is this thing of, well, to what audience are you saying something when you comment? Are you talking to the people in the room? Are you talking to people who aren't in the room but are assumed to be part of the conversation, or to everyone? And that can be an impediment. I mean, it depends on, you know, how much impulse control you have, and we all vary on that spectrum as well. So it's very hard to generalize. But yes, in terms of sort of commenting, it's you know, it's hard to find a nice pattern that fits all. It's really interesting. You commented about, you know, sending long messages. An interesting point in that is that often in communicating, there'll be a certain amount of mode shift, and it's sometimes very difficult to tell if the other person, with today's communications, has left their desk when they were able to be fully committed and is now driving a car, for sake of argument, where arguably they don't want to be reading. But by the same token, when one is a recipient, no one's demanding that you read stuff. It's only yourself demanding that you read it. Oh, you could just let it spool up like it was on a teletype, and you come back and read it later. There's no right or wrong to this. There's no fault. It just shows how slowly we're adapting to some of the implications of our new forms of communication.
The whole privacy and what size audience is a good point. I think generally in this community it's public, but there are of course different levels of public. The book is published, so it's explicitly public. Our other text messages people can read to an extent, but it's not the published work. But so I could imagine an act of, you come across something in the community has said, and you do, I'm going to just talk in normal computer interaction, could be more elegant. You somehow select that text and you do an action, keyboard shortcut, voice, whatever it might be, that somehow lifts that into a different space where you can write, whatever that might mean, with pictures, text, whatever, a response. And when you are done, that then goes back and is threaded into that conversation. This, of course, is the kind of thing you can do on GitHub and similar. You can do it via cited PDFs. You can do it in many different ways. But if we manage to get the one thought relating to another thought, in such a way, I can then imagine how this can then be accessed in amazing ways. Because part of the problem we have with our corpus of text, it's kind of chunky. But for instance, Brandel has done some visualizations of text. If he had one author, I use the term again, like an index card, one thought, with all the right metadata, as we would have to discuss, don't you think amazing ways to access can be developed then? And of course, I'm just going to say briefly, Mark, I'm using the term card on purpose because that word in itself means so many things. Sorry, Brandel, you were saying.
No, I certainly hope so. Yeah, I guess the issue of the formalism that you put over top of a discussion is like it challenges the what it does for all of the people. Another one is what kind of boundary and perimeter it has, whether it's a hard boundary or not. Because the group chat that we do have on Twitter is good, but there are people who are not in it, and I believe if people were to join, they wouldn't get the history. So it's the least worst thing we have for the people who are in, and it's it's always manifestly possible to copy paste history of various kinds, but it is challenging to do more than that. GitHub is really interesting as a frame for this kind of thing, and GitHub in particular has issues. The GitHub issues framework allows you to have primarily discussions around things where you can paste logs from things, but you can also just use it like a forum. So yeah, it's tricky because of financial cost one, but also the sort of level of implied buy-in for people to be sort of participate, but then the boundary of being able to let more people in at different times over time is another sort of community feature that many people have paywalled, as folks have pointed out, and it's not super cheap actually. So Slack is $9 a month per person, and I don't know what Discord is, but I can take a look.
We're paying $1.13 per user in our Slack account, Brandel. And you
That's
asked about
good, yeah.
Discord is free. Yeah, you can have free Slack, but the free Slack doesn't allow for archiving.
That's right. It's got a 90-day limit on it. So I believe, Dini, that is that specifically an academic license, or is that something that you have for another
There's
one?
an educational license. That's what we had, the free version before the pandemic, and then when the pandemic hit, we went full on Slack, and we have Basecamp. Basecamp's free for academics, for educational purposes. Slack introduced the educational pricing, which is 85% cheaper than the non-educational. So we're paying $1.13 per user, and the user has to be using Slack in the last 90 days. And so we have some students we keep the alums in our Slack account so we can stay connected to our alums, but a lot of them are inactive for several months and they'll come back. So we don't get counted for everybody. We have something like 1,118 people in our Slack account for my department, but they're not all active all the time. I think I'm paying for 350 per month. So my bill is about $400 roughly.
So I am concerned about using proprietary systems for group dialogue. I understand that, software and servers aren't free. Yeah, just small comment. Leon, you go, sorry.
Yeah, I notice an interesting spectrum. If I think about Slack and things what Mark Anderson just said, is that Slack is sort of like do it all. You can do everything with it, basically. That's what it boils down to. And Mark Anderson was mentioning, like, who's the audience going to be? So I think the question might also be like, what do we people in the community want to sort of like, how do we want to do it? But also like, what is the goal for the receivers? Like, is the end goal a book? Because if we're going from, if the book is the end goal, which is the slowest form of communication, I would say, to get it to the people, then that might trigger a more simplified way of working together. But on the other hand, like something like Slack, because it has everything, it can also be a good starting point to figure out, to see which way we're. So yeah, it's a bit of a trick starting point. Will you go for the super tailored output, super fine-tuned output, or for a sort of generic output, which we can then somehow convert into something more specific?
Well, in this particular community, I'm not saying it has to be the book, as in things have to be bound into the book, but it's been years since we did the first Future of Text, so already that's become a kind of historical document in this context. And books are absolutely the slowest medium. They're also one of the most stable mediums that humans have created. So there is that. But the thing is, I'm so insanely lucky to have you guys in this community. I don't think you understand the depth of understanding that you all have. I'm sitting here as the kind of editor guy, and so often it's like, oh, okay, I'll just say, oh, fuck, that's amazing. I want to be able to put that down and share it. I really think that's important. I'm 56 years old. I spent 10 years on the symposium, many years on this before, so I'm older than most of you. And I have a serious, long, many years experience of people not understanding even the slightest bit we talk about. Some of my closest friends in the world, they just gloss over when I talk about this, and that's fine. We all have friends for different things. But I am bigging you guys up. And to see things, including Adam, who's not here because he has other duties and he's probably going to watch the recording as he does, to see him write things in Twitter and not allow me to present it to the world in the book because it wasn't written in a nice form is absolutely horrific to me. I respect him for it, so no problem saying it to him. It is really, really annoying. And the whole thing that I've gone on about so long, we've got to get this down before we all live in extended reality is part of this, of the thing. But also, it's easy for me to bitch and moan and then part of the time say how wonderful you are. But if we're going to be serious about this, we have to address how to make it actually useful and fun and interesting and engaging, right? How can we take a thought out of your head and put it in a space so that the rest of us can access it in a useful way? The most basic communication questions are what we're asking here. It has to be as fun and easygoing as TikTok for those who like TikTok. And it has to connect to a wider body like the oldest encyclopedia you can imagine, right? Wouldn't that be the ultimate goal for our community? Peter and Carl, was that on that issue, or should Fabian jump in, or what's going on in your heads?
A thought on the preservation discussion from the sidebar.
Okay, let's sidebar that a little bit. Fabian, do you have something on this particular issue?
Yeah, I think one of the challenge, or I don't want to say conflict, but I think some of us are okay with the description. Namely, we name the problem. So the result of our discussion as something we still need to work on. And some of us, like Adam and I think, like we want the thing itself. Let's say a prototype or a short piece of software that barely works in order to try the idea itself. And I think it's quite big difference, something that is still passive or it's just a description versus something that you can grasp and try. And I think that's some of the frustration I imagine. And one of them can be shared relatively easily as the different way that has been expressed for the last hour or so. And the other has to be lived basically or experienced, and this can be more challenging. But I think that's the distinction I see between the two. Just descriptive, well, I shouldn't say just, but descriptive, and the other one working with or through or trying or attempting what's the idea itself.
So here we have a piece of Fabian writing. The yellow bit is the only bit that was actually written first as a tweet, right? To me, this represents one thought, a very useful thought. It happens to be in our book, it happens to be in PDF. But there's absolutely no reason such a thing, like in HyperCard or any other thing, can be done. how can we figure out a way that everybody's happy in an open way? You know, blogs were interesting. The only problem I have with blogs is domain names die. Other than that, you know, and they can be differently hosted. I mean, that article there by Fabian, wasn't it brilliant? Why do we need pages and pages all the time? We need it some of the time. Carl, please.
Yeah, I think kind of seeing, I mean, we have like a unit or a card of information, and that like there are two of them, and then there's a connection between them. So it's like a story or a narrative is like a pathway through all these objects and things, and then it's like we gather them up, and then that's turned into another object. But yeah, so I mean, it's kind of the vision I've always had for a book is that it would be you have like some self-contained or at least self-referent, so it can stand on its own, but then it's connecting the, you know, the pieces and things. So I just wanted to kind of that idea.
So yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And as you know, the software for the book has been played with and played with. We have all kinds of things now. Because I consider the book a binding. I'm not saying it should be the ultimate binding. That's really, really important, but it's a binding of this knowledge, right? So here's an experiment we have where, for instance, in pink, these are all the people who've been involved in our community. So you can easily see if anybody's written an article, oh, okay. So I've referred to Mark in that one. And then we have the symposium, who was at the symposium. What I find useful once something is bound is that it is one knowledge base. So it becomes really easy to do the interactions that we talk about. For instance, select any text, do Command F, and you can see all the occurrences of that text in the document. That's actually quite useful at times, because then you can see who else has written about that. Of course, at the very end, we have a timeline too, and that's not really expected to be read. It's more a matter of if you are, let me just go a bit closer to now, like Facebook. So if you saw something early on about Facebook, then, oh, you can see where it fits in the timeline, right? It is this constant interactivity. But beyond that's just a nice, for me, nice anyway, final binding. How would you like to make these knowledge bubbles? What would your fantasy ultimate way of doing it be?
To me, it's like Lego blocks. Anything that can be combined. To me, yeah, that's exciting because I can see. Yeah, it's just recombining existing elements, not necessarily knowing how, but yeah, that's the way. Again, in terms of not just descriptive, but being able to. That's what gets me going, and when I'm excited to come back here is like, wow, if I take this idea from whomever with that other idea for whomever, I don't know what's going to be worthwhile or not. Sift through, filter through, but yeah, the recombination potential to me, that's the exciting part.
I see your hand, Leon, just really briefly. The Lego thing, for the record, the reason it excites me is the key is the fact that they connect. They don't have to have a connection, right? Meaning you don't have to have a link. They just connect. That is a fundamentally, in a sense, non-hypertextual way of looking at it. I think that is really, really compelling. Thank you for that. You kind of talked about Lego before, but I think from this perspective, it's really, really cool. Leon, please.
So you're talking about what would be your dream. Well, I am a fan of lazy constructiveness, meaning usually the best or fastest developer, they are sort of lazy, but they basically don't do too much, just enough. And in that sense, I could imagine basically maybe it's already possible. Somebody has to build it or make it, or a product will arise. But basically an AI bot which will join these conversations in which we basically share our thoughts. And just like you have always had books like with the title A Conversation With, which is basically an interview, but then sort of rewritten in a storytelling version so that it's interesting to read. In the same way, this AI bot trained with all the future of text books, so it knows the reading style or the preferred reading style of all the authors of the past, and sort of basically writes perhaps a chapter of that day in a future of text style way, with sort of like coherent terms which are sort of, you know, also existing in the training data in the old books. And of course it can evolve a bit, new terms will arrive, etc. But that would be I think the fastest way to get to the slowest medium, a book.
That's really, so that's a way to extract and put together. But before I let you go, how do you actually want to add to this? Purely spoken in these meetings, or do you want a means through which you can author your thoughts?
Well, from a lazy perspective, like authoring would sort of, I don't know, like I think individually people authoring what is being said, I think you could be able to just instruct the AI to sort of use quotes or quote sentences so that authors won't have any objections later to it. But from my personal perspective, I would rather not have to edit it, because then the whole idea of the AI superpower would sort of like wouldn't really be useful if we still have to edit it afterwards. But that's my, I know probably some people who have a very intrinsic connection to writing might now think like, Leon, what the hell are you talking about? This is like disgusting what you're suggesting.
No, it's not that. And Peter, please hold your powder dry just for another few seconds. So I just looked at my immediate reminders. That's what it's called on the Mac. For those of you, it's like a to-do list or notes. One of the posts is an idea for somebody to be able to subscribe to a timeline, because we're talking about timelines, right? Meaning that there can be some official ones like the history of a war, whatever, but then there can also be a timeline from our meetings. So just develop a way to deal with that. That is one thought. I'm not saying we should discuss that now. That's not my point at all. But my point is, in which way should I be able to take that thought that I just described to you pretty much in full and give it to you? Right? Should it be a blog post? Should it be on Twitter? Should it be on something new? How can I take that thought into our shared space in a way that you can access and choose to digest or not? But at the end of the year, end of the day, whatever, it can relatively easily be compiled into a longer volume where I may choose to delete it from the final presentation, of course, but at least it doesn't have to be a lot of manual nonsense. That's kind of the thought. But Peter, I've spoken way too long. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, a couple thoughts from before. For one, in terms of preservation, I find that URLs are becoming far, far too brittle. And I'm actually having I have two strategies that I'll wind up using now. The URL will be broken, invariably. And then my next step is to go to the Internet Archive and see if there's an archived copy of the URL. Then I will discover, much to my horror, this page has never been archived. Would you like to archive it? Which is no good because the URL is already broken and doesn't exist anymore. Or it's now a parking page for somebody wanting to sell me the right to purchase the URL that once held something that I cared about. So my next approach will be to see if it's something that I'd read before. I'll try to remember a globally unique phrase. If there was some little snippet, and here's the problem there, it can't be something that was quoted a lot, because then it'll pull up a whole bunch of extraneous things. So I don't want it to be something that's a meme, because then it won't be useful as a search discriminator. So instead, I might remember some phrase that stuck out of my head from the text that isn't even on point for the main text, but it has a very high probability of being a unique construction of phraseology. And in some cases, I've gotten really lucky, and Google will pop that right out because it turns out the item had been full text scanned. And because I can remember that one little bit of wordplay from the source, it'll be enough to pull it up for me. If that fails, then my next fallback will be to try to think of ideas of reference that appeared within the text that hadn't been combined anywhere else globally. So it might be Epcot, Chinese food, and 3 or 4 things that individually have very, very low discriminatory power. But the fact that I remembered it was about a conference that was held here on such and such a topic, and there'd been some other discussion that, again, wasn't related to the main point, but that being brought in conjunction with the other things will be enough, and then I'll get lucky. And if I don't get lucky with that, I'll just scream in frustration and hope that someday it will randomly reappear and I'll be able to bag it then. As to how I'd like to author things, I'd really like to have more thought go into tagging affordances. So far, the standard approach is you just have the little search terms, and maybe you can drag them onto your post, or you can type them in a little side region. And somewhat better than that would be, say, Scrivener's ability to have nested tags. So that way, if I'm using a sub tag, it would know that because it's a sub tag of another tag, I've implicitly tagged the other thing with the somewhat broader terms. Then another thought that comes to mind is, going forward for authoring, I'd like to consciously put globally unique phrases in my documents. And that goes back to Jeff Raskin's talk about eliminating user IDs and passwords and replacing them with weird phrases pulled out of a very, very broad space. So maybe 2 or 3 adjectives, a verb and an adverb, throw them together in a humanly memorable, grammatically correct sequence that has absolutely nothing to do with the document. That's, your purple grouse running or some crazy phrase like that, and then explicitly put that at the top of my document. So I might have, this is purple grouse running, and stick that at the head of my document. Then I know down the road that if it gets copied somewhere, searching for the exact phrase, this is purple grouse running, will pull up a copy of the document. Otherwise, if it's just purple grouse running, not starting with a this is, then I'm thinking, well, maybe to make that a little bit easier to discriminate between those 2 uses, maybe all caps if it's the document purple grouse running, and use mixed case if I'm referencing purple grouse running. And that would let a system automatically tell between copies of the original versus discussions of the original. Then, as far as the user interface, I started sort of dipping into sci-fi in my thinking, and I started thinking about the dial home device from the Stargate franchise, how there was a set of symbols, and the order in which they pressed the symbols would have semantics. And that made me thinking about inverse parsers from Crockford's work. And what I kind of would like to have would be maybe 2 bands of symbols, one which could be categories of reference, and the other relations among them. So then, just by pressing those same symbols and clicking on them over again, it could be in like maybe a little pie menu to really have that Stargate look, although that's not really relevant for our purposes, to be able to click to indicate I want people, writing about organizations made up of people from industry and academia. They'd have a few combinators, and just by clicking the combinator, so that you don't have too many terms cluttering up, it's not going to be a menu of every possible permutation, but instead the categories of symbols, which when combined would allow me to construct this detailed descriptor. And then we could have description logic software play with generalizations of whether you have subsumption between what's described by one query versus another query. And that kind of an environment, I think, would have low enough cognitive load on the user. I'm just clicking some categories, some relations, and a couple basic logical combinators in a sidebar panel to very rapidly construct what's going to be a fully parsable, uniquely defined descriptor. And in addition to that, I might like to have some discourse level symbols in the sidebar so that I could explicitly say, now I'm going to be criticizing something and use that to put some inline phraseology in my document that would also be machine readable so that I'd have a semi-structured hypertext. So I want the little affordance to help me chain together my logical argument in terms of semantic chunks of it. So it'll be there and it'll be findable without having to rely on an AI guesstimating what it was that I had in mind when I use this big bag of words. Let's make it explicit because it is explicit in my head when I'm in the act of writing it. So what I want is the interface to make it as utterly painless as possible for me to capture that structure as I'm going. Okay, that's it. I'm going to sit down now and rest.
That sounds like an article right there, Peter. I think Brendel has comments on this. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, no, those are really interesting publications, Peter. I think that there's a lot in there that can be worked with. One of the things that it occurs to me about making a system that consists of symbols and references that yes, you can, and 3 words and all of those other things matter. One of the things that it sort of presupposes that is it's still built on a substrate of the web. And so it's worthwhile to have a proper sort of scrutiny and investigation of the materiality of the web as being as the mechanism that's primarily kind of structured to the extent that it still is these days via Google and other folks by plain unordered text search. And so like if you are going to try to build anything in any kind of retrieval mechanism, like I do think Google is getting worse, but it is still the least worst mechanism for being able to do that sort of free spelunking through things that your Raskins 3 words and things like that would facilitate. In terms of what I wanted to talk about, one of the things that I really like doing is just trying on specific applications and websites and other things as reference points. So, what if Future of Text was a Discord? Yes, but what if it was a Google Doc? What if it was like a single Google Doc and chat or some sort of enunciation of specific things was a given Google Doc, and understanding that you have the ability to construct the document per se in the left panel. And then there's commentary. You have the ability to apply comments to specific areas. And then there's also chat on the right. And it's not necessarily the right way of doing it, but similarly, just looking at Apple Pages, it looks like it doesn't have free chat, but it has collaboration, has live collaboration, the ability for people to be added into it late. It has the ability to apply commentary and things like that. But yeah, like I think that it's really interesting as if not as a legitimate suggestion, then as a sober provocation. I was like, what are all of the things that exist? What are the encodings that are germane? What are distractions and would need to be sort of removed from a community's practice? The Apple Freeform is a document. I will an application. I will say that for it. Some people like it. My daughter among them, apparently, which is really cool. She uses it for being able to assemble things, and if she had friends who were allowed to play on iPads with her with it, then she would be able to use that as a shared document for being a dollhouse. But the point being, generally, like specifically looking to applications. Wikipedia also really, if I'm in, Wikipedia was also a fascinating thing for me to use at some point in the past, where rather than individuals being pages, I made a genealogy wiki, but rather than an individual being a page, an individual is actually only a tag. And so then that meant that their identity per se was all of the totality of the documents, primarily images that they were tagged within. And I thought that was a really interesting way of running it, that had some really interesting sort of default flow and consequences. And so, yeah, like I think looking at things that exist and actually their functionality is a really interesting way of pursuing these things.
I'm not, thank you for that. I'm not sure if Fabian is still here, but I want to just show you guys something. You may or may not know this. It's really simple. So here's a really cool, also super short article by Leon. So I can do a copy as quote, Command-Shift-C. And then I go to the chat here with all of you. Just stop sharing. And hang on. I already had something ready to go for you there, so excuse me 1 second. So this is not the demo I was planning for. Anyway, look in the text chat there. This is what I copied, right? So I think that is amazing. And I'm not talking about the me bit. I'm talking about the fact that clipboards can have more stuff on it. I think that is an absolutely incredible innovation by the Apple company. That quote there is from Leon, not me. I created the document, but because of Visual Meta, because it knows the text under the heading, it knows it was Leon. It knows what page it was and all of that stuff. So what's in here is cool, but it could be whatever. So just to be a bit pushy, and also because we're running a bit low on time, we have, other things to talk about. Just imagine a system where Fabian, who's not here, makes something in XR. Imagine we all make our own system, but we use, I'm sorry, obviously I'm going to come back to the thing I've invested my intellectual life in. Doesn't matter what it is, as long as it has the right metadata. And of course, I suggest Visual Meta. I'm perfectly happy for another system to take over, but for the sake of argument, I will fight on that hill. And that's all it is, right? If you write it in HTML or PDF, you use JSON or whatever, it shouldn't matter. Here's an example of a copy that contains all kinds of stuff. So imagine a system whereby you have your favorite vendor and you bring forth a little card thing, you write stuff, and a ton of metadata is added, like we talked about many times before, the time, location, but maybe it even spies on you. And this is what I was listening to Peter just now. It includes the calendar entry for that time. It may even have access to your Zoom transcripts, whatever it is, it's spying on you for you. And then you can choose when you make it public through RSS or equivalent. Leon had another example of that. What should be included? Bam. Problem solved, right? There's got to be some way of building something like that, because I am an absolute Apple fanboy, but I do not want my knowledge environment to be Apple. Look what they did to the iBooks, right? That's not very nice. And it goes for all other companies, including my own company. You will end up owning the standard, but just because it's easier, forget about lock-in, it's just easier.
I was going to say, I mean, this argues that the workers need to take back control of the means of production. I mean, because the things you've demonstrated that we can do this. So it's perhaps less the build. I mean, probably the harder part is for us all to decide to just stop using things that don't have the affordances we want. Now that's really hard. I know how insane that is as a suggestion, but in a sense, that's the logical take from this. If we keep using things because they're convenient or free or cheap or whatever, it's sort of hard to move ahead, because the only way, others would argue, well, you just go to the people who make the incumbent players in the field and, persuade them against their better nature to insert these things. And that might happen. But the thing I'm seeing across the piece is that our what we would call now our writing tools are becoming more than something that effectively just transcribes the written word. You know, we would have written literally onto a piece of paper or parchment or whatever. And that's interesting. That is actually interesting because it sort of changes our writing experience. Not for everything, not maybe for making your to-do list or something, but for certainly your more considered writing. There are all these there are these new avenues, and you perhaps want to be in a writing environment that has a sort of liminal space for metadata where you're sort of conscious that, as well as maybe what you're writing, you're producing as your main communication, also wants to have some sort of shading around the side that you may have to do. But it's almost like it's like you might have written a footnote in the past. You need to add on this metadata because if you wish to have for it to have the richness,
or it can be automatically added, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I mean, it's just that I don't see, I don't see this arriving in MS Office next week because someone's going to say, well, how do we charge for it?
I see Leon and Brendel have hands up. I just want to really briefly elaborate. So, as some of you know, I've made a library for Reader, right? And it does a few things that I think are so relevant. If I just start writing something, it does a search, not unique, but boom, there's a book on the history of Rome, and then I can open it. I can then, sorry, it's obscured by the sorry, I was confusing myself. The zoom bar was at the bottom of the screen. But there's two things you can do here in addition. One, these documents at the top are pinned, right? So they will always be at the top. And then you can, conversely, you can control click and you can hide a document. I just have to move the zoom bar again. And then you can click and have hidden documents. I'm experimenting now, so there aren't many. The idea is some I want to be able to search, but I don't want it in my face. It's like in another room than your main library. These happen to be PDFs, but in terms of what we're talking about with these kind of knowledge card type things, it isn't that onerous to write library things. And we should all have our own favorite library system, library vendor, if it's an open thing. You can't easily make our own web browsers today, but a library thing we should be able to. Yeah, Leon.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And let me be horribly pragmatic here, or say something horribly pragmatic. I was, I'm also getting a bit of the sense of maybe we're onto something new here, and at the same time the feeling of maybe we're reinventing and ignoring the whole social media innovations. Like there is, and I think we should keep that in mind of sort of not rebuilding that, or maybe even using it. I don't know. That's a bit of a big thing to say, but. So this Fediverse with all these, let's say, open versions of a Twitter, of a Facebook, of a Instagram, like they are all talking with each other through ActivityPub, and a new sort of feature which is now being rolled out to these platforms is long format posts, so that you can write articles and you can publish them. And the possibilities, what this allows is that anybody can, everybody in this group could create a Mastodon account. You could basically write an article. You have to add in your text somewhere #FOT, and then in the search, if you enter #FOT, you will get all the articles in chronological order plus an RSS button. So basically, from this RSS, you could convert it to a PDF with all the visual meta automatically generated and whatever AI intelligence on top of that. So that would be a very dirty, pragmatic approach where you would basically not have to invent a lot of mechanisms which are already sort of like innovated in that space and implemented. And sorry, I want to make sure, because last time Frode, you said, yeah, I tried Mastodon running it on my server, but the whole point is that it doesn't matter on which public Mastodon website you sign up, because you can, these things are all integrated. So it's sort of like a distributed cluster, and everything is connected. So no need to set up our own server or something.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Leon. And I see Brandel, but I just wanted to say the point of publishing, it should be through any of these. So yeah, that was good. Thank you. Brandel, please.
I think the point that Mark made about the political realities of the infrastructure that is provided on the terms under which it's sort of expected to be used, I think is a really relevant one. And it makes me think about, where are the contexts in which there is a sort of an open negotiation / armistice between the different sort of technology players with their various, Microsoft Office, Google Docs, Apple Pages, for better or worse, all kind of vying for things. They don't generally believe that it's their business to agree with each other about what those things do, or let alone how to talk to each other. But to harp on about it again, is like the one place where they do that is the web. And hopefully soon with the Alliance of OpenUSD. But it means that, again, like the web is not perfect, but it can also be looked at as a collection of tools. It can be used as a set of capabilities that can be then sort of cribbed and manipulated and cobbled together and sort of refigured in a range of different ways. And so insofar as web technologies exist, it's possible to kind of envision those things. I totally agree. Somebody said, we can't build our own browsers. And it would be cool if we could, or if we could, it would be cool to think about what it would be like if we were to merely apply a very heavy-handed layer of browser extensions or whatever to a browser in order to say that.
Just to agree with you and add to that, we can build our own browsers. It's not that hard, some library to have a browser pop up. It's quite trivial. Of course, it doesn't do a lot, but at least developing on the Mac, if you want to have a browser window in your application, it's relatively trivial. So your push towards using web standards as a communications means is, I think, very, very well put indeed, actually.
Yeah, you can use a WK Web View very, very easily in any kind of Mac OS environment. And to my knowledge, if you want, I don't know whether Windows has a similar thing, but a lot of people use Electron for a lot of things. Lego, to my great disappointment, their Mac app is an Electron app rather than using a WK Web View, which pulls it up to a gigabyte in size. But yeah, so yeah, it's bad. It's annoying. But yeah, so like there's a whole plethora of things. Once you start decohering what it is the browser or the web is, and starting to look at it as its constituent sort of technologies and capabilities, I think that's really freeing. And the idea that people can start to construct a browser or a browsing experience that serves their goals, that is their user agent, is a really exciting one that maybe at cross purposes with Chrome's business goals at this moment, but so it goes.
So this is very exciting. We have 4 minutes and we're finished. So how about this? Just because this is, I'm an artist, so I don't have to be reasonable. Why don't we just reinvent blogs, but let them also connect through citations? I mean, that is what I already have in Reader. That's how you can connect two documents. But why not just reverse what I've made and, have a WordPress blog, write some kind of a plugin that it can work locally as well, and have them connect to each other. They got the pinging, they got all kinds of good stuff. Blogs were amazing. And then we can start playing around with RSS feeds again, or similar, Atom, or whatever might be the fashionable one nowadays. Basically, just provide whatever the heck interface people want to have to put down their thoughts. Use a thingamajig based on real world web stuff. And then have another bunch of people make the stuff in which through we read it. Oh my gosh, the AI transcript actually got my word sentence there. That's pretty good. The thing is,
Yeah,
we can do this, right?
Yeah, I gave a talk. I spoke to a class at Carnegie Mellon this weekend in order to prepare the class for what kind of questions they should have from me. The lecturer gave them my website, which is just the front page of my zacharias.neocities.org, which has no CSS and just a link to some links to some videos about embodied cognition and extended mind. And as a professional web developer for over 20 years, it's very funny for me to completely avoid using CSS because I can make pages and make them look pretty. Hopefully, Apple.com can attest to that. But yeah, it's really interesting to recognize the multiplicity of things that a website can be, and that basic web authoring and web hosting can actually constitute. So writing an HTML document of the kind that my homepage is not hard, and it shouldn't be beyond most people to be able to open up literally just a plain text document and say, like, well, you know what a valid HTML document is? It's just a text file. And if you really want, you can wrap things in H1s and H2s, but that's actually not essential. So I'm fully for that, and I think it's pretty liberating to realize that that's the total extent of the sort of the technical substrate required in order to be able to make something that has the ability to leverage everything that lives on the web today.
Very good. So I have a request. Let's pretend that I have money for development, which I don't. And let's pretend that we've all agreed on this web stuff. And let's further pretend that I want to have in author, write a document, export it in whatever format. Of course, that's the key. I also have Command J for journal, which is just a normal author document, but it's supposed to be written forever, so you can search with it and all of that. Imagine if I spend a little bit of money to have another feature, which is just add a thought. Let's not use the word card anymore, just add a thought. And I do that, and I have like a library for these things, just for me as an individual user. Now, here's the question for you guys. For me to share these thoughts with you through adding a lot of metadata, and for it to be open and to be accessible and useful for you offline, how should that be done? It's almost like sharing glossaries, isn't it? So if we manage to combine the citation logic with addressability and the URL-based logic, this should be possible, right?
Yeah. I think the ability for something like author to generate things like HTML fragments wouldn't go amiss. I sent you just then wrote a USD file, an AR quick look file that has tapped through sort of stateful transition through a very simple dialogue tree that happens to also be able to exist in augmented reality. Anybody else with an iPhone, I'm happy to send that through as well. Or Frodo, you can pass that on to anybody. But yeah, like I think the ability to kind of author documents or document fragments of a kind that are relevant or possible for folks to be able to share like that is very promising.
That was very cool. That ran in preview. I'm now sharing it with whoever would like it. It's a grand.
So if you look at it on your phone specifically, then it's something that actually exists in space. You have the ability to. It's a quick look, an augmented reality quick look file.
The document you sent me the other day, the article, looks just spectacular.
Yeah, it's so stupid. So I was working on Apple has used the universal scene description format, USD format for being able to create AR quick look files, these augmented reality previews. It makes it for products, but it's also sort of proposing it for media like other people's products, other shoes, or promotional material for all mankind, television shows. What I did is I processed a New York Times article and was able to automatically generate, that's the entirety of the article in reader mode, and all of the text in it is sort of presented as text. And so it's this 4.5 meter tall span of things with all of the images in it, actually as the text. And what I just sent now to the state machine one is you tap through multiple stages of a thing where you tap and says, do you like mudkips? If you tap yes, then it says yay, and if you tap no, it says boo. But what that means is that you can have the selective display of stateful information where you can kind of string together these things and create, if not a hypertext, then a non-linear process of being able to follow things constituted entirely out of text. As you can also see, that state machine file is only 3 kilobytes. And so if it's comprised exclusively or at least primarily of text, then these quick look files, despite being self-contained, despite being sort of nominally for showing Nike shoes or Apple AirPods, have the ability to do some really interesting jobs, and also jobs in space. So yeah, just something I'm really excited about, teasing out some opportunities and possibilities with. So if you've got an iPhone, then definitely give it a try.
Yeah, it's super cool, and the text is super crisp.
Yeah, and it's so the other thing about that text is that because it's encoded as text, then everybody who builds a viewer of that kind has the ability to encode it and represent it to whatever fidelity is sort of desirable or necessary. It's not something that's been turned into tessellated polygons. Although if you get it looking big enough, and you can see the polygons that Apple has currently decided to tessellate O's and P's, things like that. But that's
So I have
something that can be decisions that can be changed.
I don't know if everyone agrees with me, but I have the feeling that Brandel wants to make an RSS reader for XR. And I think we should.
I never used RSS. I don't have a relationship with it, but I'm interested in creating a space in which people can apprehend text and manipulate it, having the ability, although that's something that RSS I think didn't do, is provide a context for people to then reconstitute and build out their own meaning and response to it. Something that is really interesting, reading history of reading and Too Much to Know. Thank you, Mark, and everybody who's made those recommendations, is that people have had relationships with text in a much more concrete way than I, as somebody who's been terrified of destroying or damaging books, have really thought about it. Reading's been this kind of passive process that I think has held me and many other people back. So I want to wreck shit, but I also recognize that it should be done in a constructive way, made out of standards, and hopefully not totally destructively. Anyway, yeah.
So Gabo and Leon as well, and Peter, being developers, let's do this, okay? And one thing that I will give you, whatever format and thing we agree on over the next few weeks or months, I will put our book into that with 1 article per thing. And we will experiment with what that means, because RSS as an idea is brilliant. But of course, then there's the history of Google buying and destroying things. Plus, most of the interfaces are very basic and silly. I could very easily imagine, I'm sitting here now with my beautiful 27-inch screen, having maybe a column for each one of you guys for your feeds, having a few filters for what to see and what not to see. I may not want to see everything new about Minter, only the highlights, for example, right? That kind of stuff. And it's completely open. So if we embed enough metadata in an open way, then at the end of the year, I should be able to, as a publisher, go in and say, do I have your permission to take this range of your feeds? And you will then see the result, and you can say yes or no. Becomes relatively doable. Leon, you first, please, and then I hope Gabriel and, Gabo and Brandel have comments.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to add something. I don't really have a big connection with RSS. However, I did look into it this weekend. Surprisingly, this space has matured a lot. There is now RSS 3.0. I've installed Fresh RSS, which also seems to be able to follow not only RSS, but also just websites. And on top of that, there is a service. You can also self-host it, but there is also a public one. It's called rsshub.app, which basically turns every popular platform out there into a feed. So for some reason, I was surprised to see a very Twitter-like interface with a lot of cool features, labels, and everything. And I could connect to everything, which I didn't expect. So yeah, in case we have a look at the new RSS space, then looking at rsshub.app gives you a bit of a feeling that this RSS is now looking at the web through the lens of feeds, so and not as RSS feeds anymore. It's becoming a bit more feed-like. Everything is a feed kind of thing. So that was just my few cents. Cheers. And I have to go now because I heard the food is getting cold. So
Okay.
cheers.
See you next Monday, I hope. I live on.
Bye-bye.
I was just, Gabo, please go ahead.
No, like I'm so in my hole, so deep in my own problem space that right now RSS breaks my understanding of the world right now. Because basically I believe in authenticated data with cryptography, right? And with content addressability with content addressability. And so RSS, I always think about RSS that there's a reason why it is not being used like in mainstream. And I need to think about it. I'm sorry. I need to think about it.
Absolutely fine. Just go in a context here. So I'm thinking, as I wrote on which you couldn't read because we're talking. So imagine for our use, for instance, one of the things you can do in an RSS feed in this hypothetical system is to have a citation, meaning that if people download our book as a PDF, then we can feed articles from that book in RSS feed, and they should be able to click in there to open their local copy to the right page. That's trivial now. So that means that the authentication is basically the PDF, which of course can be faked. All of this can be faked. I'm thinking no more security than having a printing press in the 1950s, right? So if you put a new thought in RSS, of course you can do that. You can choose to put it by itself or with an accompanying PDF page. You can also maybe even put a link to Internet Archive off that if you choose to put it somewhere else. There should be different ways, but the thing is, we're almost saying Twitter, except it's open, and you can thread the way you want it to, and compile the way you want to. That's basically all we're saying. And when I say RSS, I'm not married to RSS. It is a great thing, but if there are other things that are better, you're fine, as long as they're open and easy. I mean, obviously today, a great use case would be, when this is done, I'm going to take the entire transcript and put it on our blog for Future Text Lab. And because I'm using the Zoom assistant, all the names are automatically signed. Thank goodness, that took a lot of time. I will then turn that into a PDF as one of my ways of storing it, in addition to the web page. I should then also, in this way of thinking, relatively easily chapterize it to have different parts of it out. And the way you can chapterize is to the video, but you should also be chapterized to a document. So this is the way in the future you could go back to say, oh, that launch day, what was it? And finally, after all these years, we can actually find stuff.
Yeah, but I don't think that RSS, I think that RSS is more in the context of discoverability, right? But I don't think that that's what you are describing here, that discoverability. So I don't know if RSS is going to bring a lot of value to.
Well, so this is another case where I think like the basic premise of web technologies is that there are high level goals and then there are lower level ways of doing it. And there are people who we've fully abandoned successfully, not always, but sometimes we fully abandon a technology like web VR is completely dead. Nobody supports it, and that's for the best, because we all collectively decided that WebXR was a better run at that. And so there are protocols and there are specific sort of implemented technologies, and sometimes they are simply just another run at the same problem. I'm just looking at Blue Sky as well. The XMPP extensions that they're building may be a little bit more appropriate to what you're thinking about, Gabo. So I think that would be a really interesting thing to look at there. I unfortunately also have to go now. But this has been really interesting, really provocative, and I'm very excited about carrying it on further.
Shall we put down that next Monday is how to communicate thoughts in boxes, to say it in a joking way, for those who can make it?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you all for today. I've also been pinged a few times that it's hard to leave this discussion. I thank you all very, very much, and I look forward to much more. And maybe at the end we can even wake up Jim. Is he napping or listening?
Thanks so much for bringing the community together, Frode.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you again. It's such a wonderful thing to be part of.
Thank you for being the community. Have a great week, everyone.
Have a great week.
Okay, bye.